Hey guys, what is up? Swim here, and today I've got a very special deck for you guys. So this is kind of a series. I guess this is the start of a series. I don't know how series works, but this is the start of a series that's effectively like a deck guide light. These aren't going to be super in-depth deck guides because the game isn't playable yet. So, you know, my deck guides when the game is like actually out are going to be a lot more complicated. We're going to talk about like stuff like how to mulligan, stuff like, you know, where to play which cards and like which tech is against what, and like a lot of like budget swaps. You know, the whole swim deck guide experience. These are very light. This is more like a showcase rather than a guide. Okay, so this is my Ionia-Jinx Aggro list. So this is partially based off of MinUS's aggro and some other like Ionia style aggros we've seen in the past. And basically this version runs some of the same cards, some different ones, but the splash in this case is Piltover and Zaun. And that gives us the ability to run Jinx with just a smidgen of some discard synergy cards, okay? So let's talk about the general shell of the list. Basically, this is an extremely aggressive deck. This is about as aggressive as decks can be. This is what it means to be aggro. You're going to be threatening lethal on like turn 5 for a lot of your opponents, right? And this is the whole point of aggro. People are going to have to make like really bad value trades into you, and you're going to be cleaning up with your top end on Jinx. Okay, so just going through the cards really simply, kind of one by one. Well, I guess we can start with Ionia as a whole. I think Ionia has the best aggro shell of any region in the game right now. I know, like, immediately, a lot of players intuitively feel like Nox or Noxus has the most. Noxus is very strange. They have some very powerful aggro tools, but most of their aggro tools are actually just kind of below curve and not really great. To the point where Nox is a better aggro splash. And we see some aggressive decks, like some Ionia Splash Nox and some like Demacia Splash Nox, but it's not really necessary, and like they only kind of have like 3 or 4 good aggressive cards. Ionia is kind of where it's at if you want a real aggro shell. Like you can see just like the power of all the different Ionian cards here, right? So Inspiring Mentor, easy, tight, super good. 1/1/1, it gives a hand buff for +1/+1. Everything's great about this. This hand buff is good on everything. I mean, the easiest thing is Navori Highwayman later, which doubles any buffs that are on it because it clones itself with whatever stat line it has. But even when you're using this on an elusive, you're getting value. When you use it on a quick attack, you're getting value. Use it on like Zed, that 3 quick attack becomes a 4 quick attack, which is really good. And then it's got 3 health, so it's outside of certain kill ranges. Like +1/+1 on a hand is just great, and obviously this works well with Conspirator, because the ideal thing is you want to Conspirator the Mentor back into your hand, right? To be able to replay it again and just get kind of the value off of Conspirator that way. Navori Blade Scout right now is a 2-of in the list. This is something you have the option to play early, but for the most part, this should be coming down kind of like later. You know, you don't want to develop this too early. It's just kind of poking the elusive that it's getting in those rounds, right? So it's just a kind of solid thing, and this is a good part to kind of like point out, like you might see a couple of the ratioing. The deck has sort of weak ratioing in general. I think that efficient, like very efficiently built decks tend to have like less 1-ofs and 2-ofs, which I think is actually opposite of how a lot of players would intuitively see it. But yeah, typically I really don't want that many like 1-ofs and 2-ofs, and some things might change. Blade Scout to me is a fine 2-of. It's something that's like solid early, but reasonably speaking, it's just there for the option to play it early, whereas later it's just like, you know, 1 mana, maybe go face with elusive later, right? Rush. So Rush is your quintessential aggro combat trick. This is one of the best combat tricks in the game. It's just pretty good. Don't be afraid to give quick attack to something that already has quick attack, because you're just going to be able to get some extra damage in. Which basically, if they block my Zed, good chance they're doing it with something with 4 health, right? If I give Zed Rush, I don't really care that he already has quick attack. My Zed now has the ability to kill your 4 health unit, if it was indeed a 4 health blocker. Of course, if not, I wouldn't use Rush. And I don't take any damage, right? So don't be afraid to do it like that. This is also a good time to point out, this is actually a terrible time to point out, a more professional YouTuber would have said this like minutes ago. But in the description of this video, I am linking a potentially updated version of the list that is going to have potentially the ratioing is going to be a little bit different because in the description of this video, I'm going to go ahead and link you to my Mobalytics page that has all the decks that I have submitted. So if you go to that page, you'll see this list. You know, if I have changed 1 or 2 cards by the time, since the time I've recorded this video, you'll see those changes on that link. And you'll also be able to see from that interface all of the other decks that I've posted publicly, right? And as time goes on, I'm going to add a ton more to this. I plan on having like my Mobalytics page be just a list of like all the decks that I recommend. Some of them I'll have built, like this one. Some of them I won't be the author of, and that's fine, because I'll obviously credit whoever made them and link their stuff. Okay, so Sparring Student. This card's nuts. It's just crazy. When you summon an ally, it just gets +1/+1. Obviously, this deck plays a lot of swarm stuff. You might say Highwayman is kind of swarmy. You might say like Urchin plus Jury Rig is kind of swarmy because they both play like 2 units at a time. But in reality, this deck just has so many 1-drops that you're just kind of swarming with everything, right? Like anything that's just like playing 1s is just adding more swarm. You know, sometimes this deck opens just by, sometimes this deck plays like 3 1s on turn 3, right? So you're just gonna have so many units to be able to empower this with. It's just crazy. And the same is Green Glade Duo as well. Just when you summon an ally, just gains value off of that, right? Astute Academic. This card is just here for value right now. It's effectively a 1-mana 2/2 for most of the game, which is, you know, obviously just pretty efficient stats because it's just the same draw that you're doing every turn. Now you might notice like it can get a little ahead of that with Zaunite Urchin and even Jinx, but for the most part, it's a 1-mana 2/2. I will point out, when you're attacking with Zaunite Urchin and Astute Academic, make sure your Urchin's on the left side, always, because if it gets blocked, the Last Breath will like trigger first before the Academic, because attacking goes left to right, basically. So if the Urchin gets blocked, then your Academic will be swinging for 1 extra attack if the Urchin dies during that combat phase, okay? Okay, so Zaunite Urchin, pretty straightforward, very simple synergy here. Oftentimes, if you have a Jury Rig, you're going to be discarding it with Zaunite Urchin, right? And that will summon the 1/1, and you'll get a really clean exchange. When it dies, you'll be able to draw a free card. So that's going to be, like, oftentimes when it's, like, you can use it as, like, a chump block depending on what is attacking you. But oftentimes, that's going to be, like, when the board is clearing as well. Jury Rig. You might think that this card is reliant on Zaunite Urchin to be valuable, and in reality, this card is actually just really solid on its own. This is, if this card wasn't solid on its own, I would never be running Zaunite Urchin plus this card. It's not really where this card's getting its value from, right? It's just an option. But you can play this card on its own, and it's effectively a 1-mana 1/1 that plays at burst speed, which is a pretty useful power in and of itself. So something that this deck often wants to be doing is that in later stages of the game, past like turn 3 or so, sometimes turn 4, depends on the matchup, but past a certain point, you want to be open attacking. Open attacking is a really powerful strategy. Basically, instead of like developing units, when you have the attack token, you just attack so that they can't develop blockers or play slow speed spells or just do a lot of anything. You just slam the attack. Not always, but very, very commonly after a certain point in time. Now, what Jury Rig allows you to do is its burst speed. That's a very big deal. So if we're on like turn 5, I can play Jury Rig and then attack, because burst doesn't pass the action to my opponent. So for example, if I top deck an Astute Academic on turn 5, maybe I don't want to play it. Maybe I just want to attack and not let my opponent play a blocker. But Jury Rig, I can just play this. Sometimes even without Urchin, it's just a 1/1. At burst speed, I get that attack in. Sometimes, maybe I can even play this during the opponent's combat phase, develop a 1/1 blocker. There's a lot of things this card can do. It's actually like, it's a little better than it immediately seems, and with the bonus of like the Urchin synergy when that does happen, it's able to take off, right? At the end of the day, it's not great on its own, and it's not great with the Urchin synergy, but it's got both sides, and it actually ends up like being able to do pretty well in addition to this, as well as without it. Okay, Keeper of Masks, a pretty solid 2 of in this list. I'm not sure on the ratioing of this card, but it's not really what I would like as a 3 of. Basically, how this card works is when it's summoned, everything else on your board gets 1 attack for that round. The awkward thing here is when you really think about it, like, Obviously, you don't really want to be playing this defensively, because attack doesn't really do that much defensively. It does sometimes, but this is an aggro deck. You want to be using the attack on your turn. When you have like later board states like turn 4, turn 5, a lot of the time you're kind of forced to open attack, right? Which means you can't develop a unit before your attack, right? You kind of want to be developing your units on your opponent's turn and then open attacking immediately on your turn, right? So Keeper of Masks, you have the ability to play it if you don't want to open attack, but that's rare. And then before those turns, like if you're playing this on like turn 3, you're usually not hitting that wide of a board, right? So this card is like, it's a little weird. It seems nuts in theory, right? Because it's a 2/2/3 with just a good effect, but it's caught in the middle of like a bunch of awkward scenarios to play it. You can never maximize its value. And therefore, it finds a home as a 2 of in this list. I'm fine with that. When I do have like token on 3 and I push this like alongside a 1-drop on 3, like let's say on 3, like I have a pre-developed board, I'm token on 3, attacking odds, I open Urchin into Ring, into Keeper of Masks, hey, that feels really good. That's pretty nuts when that happens, you know, and then I get my attack, right? But it is fairly niche. Navori Conspirator, this card's just great. I actually was thinking about cutting this card down from a 3 of, but I think it's just too good at elusive. It's just like 2/3/2 elusive. That's just a little too good. And of course, the ideal bounce is Mentor. You can just reuse Mentor again for more value. Nothing really wrong with that exchange. Navori Highwayman. This is, even without like Mentor value, this card's just solid. Mentor pushes it over the edge. It's a good Avalanche Survivor with Mentor as well. But for the most part, I don't think this deck really needs Avalanche Survivors per se. But yeah, this card is, generally speaking, pretty solid. It's going to be just allowing your board to develop wider, you know, buffing duos, buffing students. Not too much to say about this. Silent Shadowseer, this is kind of your reach card at the end. I think I might actually cut this down to 0. I think with Jinx, this deck might not really need this reach card, but it's actually pretty solid. I mean, honestly, this card is just fairly efficient. It's sort of like 2 mana, 3 Nexus damage because it's elusive, and it even creates another copy of itself. So you can just kind of keep putting that 2 mana for 3 damage every turn. For example, it's kind of like a Mystic Shot, except it has the ability to, you know, be 3 damage instead of 2, which is a big deal. Stuff like Mystic Shot in a deck like this mostly just wants to be going face anyway. So I don't really see I don't really see the appeal of running a card like that here, although I have considered it, spent some time on it. But yeah, basically, at the end of the game, you know, when your hand is out and when you're out of resources, your opponent has stabilized, maybe they've avalanched you or done some AoE, Silent Shadowseer is there to clean up, because your opponent will basically be at like 5 health at this point of the game, maybe even less, and a poke or 2 by Shadowseer will just end the game out, right? So it's possibly it's a 2 of, it's possibly it's a 0 of. I'm not actually sure. This is the card that I'm not sure about the ratioing quite yet. Academy Prodigy, this card is currently a 2 of in this list. Not certain how I feel about this. It's sort of like an efficient discount Lucian. 2/3/1 quick attack is just kind of a solid 2-drop, but I'm gonna need to play the deck a lot more before I can actually like suss out the ratioing of a card like this. I think it's definitely a solid option in the deck. I have no problems running this card in this deck, and it helps, like, you know, basically just smoothing out the 2s, but it could be down to just like a kind of filler 1 of. We'll see. Deny, I think, is a pretty solid card here. In this version, I decided to run 1 Deny. I'm kind of torn. There's an aggro mentality. In aggro, like Magic the Gathering or something, you often wouldn't run Deny. Because in an aggro deck, you don't really want to keep counter spells open. You need to be very proactive about your mana usage. It turns out in Runeterra, though, that logic just doesn't scan. Deny is just a good card. The biggest thing that makes Deny a good card is the open attacking. As I mentioned before, because you are in a scenario where when you're on turn 5, turn 6, you know, these last turns of the game, you just want to open attack, you don't want to do anything else, then I just stop some of the things the opponent can do, right? So I think it could even be a 2 of in this list, definitely. But in this version, I have it as a 1 of right now. I think it's totally fine to run, and I mean, even in aggro, this card just gets places, right? That's a large part of the reason why we have like Jury Rig and Rush as well. Because again, when you're open attacking, just because you have to do it, it's so efficient, stopping the opponent from playing so many things. When you're open attacking, stuff like Deny or some burst speed spells are just able to get really good value, right? Whereas like all of your slow speed stuff just can't do anything until 2 rounds later, right? Which is crazy. Then we've got our champions. You have seen them here already. 3 Zed, 3 Jinx. It's just like, you know, how much is there to say? You play the Zed, you smash forward. It's really good. This card's just an aggro staple. This card's nuts. They're probably going to have to nerf this card. This card's crazy. As mentioned before, he's even pretty good with something like Mentor. He just fits the rest of the deck so well, right? You know, he spawns the clone for, you know, buffing up Student and Duo. Just great. Jinx is kind of your top-end finisher. Now, the biggest question a lot of people might immediately ask is, you know, don't you need more discard to run Jinx? And the easy answer is no. I mean, this deck vomits out its hand so aggressively. It's so low to the ground, right? So many 1s and 2s, you will just exit out of your hand. Your hand will just be gone, and Jinx will just activate. And when she activates, I can't really pull it up here easily, but when she activates, you know, you get the leveled up Jinx with the super mega death rocket thing. I should actually be able to... Here is an easier way for me to do this, basically, just by going over here, but we can go to the Jinx page herself, and you can see, like, the level up, the leveled up Jinx gets the draw 1. First time you get to your hand, you get the fleeting super mega death rocket in hand, which is pretty crazy. I mean, this is a nuts card. When you have an empty hand, you're basically just going to be able to get this free 2-mana deal forward to the Nexus, and this will just kind of close out games, right? If she stays alive like 1 turn, you get to draw an extra card off of that too. Pretty crazy, just like game closer champion there. And pretty much the entire reason why we're in Piltover and Zon. And that's it. That is the deck in its entirety. So that has been kind of my deck. I think I'm just going to call these showcases rather than guides. This is like, you know, it's not on the level of like an actual swim guide. It's not going to have that level of complexity. But this was my aggro Jinx version showcase. And I guess I'll see you guys next time with more of this kind of nonsense, because we have like 3 months to kill until this game is actually out. All right, guys. Well, I'm personally going to be putting out a lot of like these Runeterra type guides. So for the fairly small amount of you guys that are interested in this sort of thing, because I know it's not hugely tons of people interested, you know, I hopefully will be able to kind of stick through the next couple of months together and enjoy, you know, I'll be doing like streams like this and these kinds of guides. And I'm really looking forward to it because I'm very excited for the game. And I don't know how to wrap up videos like this. Okay, bye.